Okay, my YouTube people, this is Rap's Garage Shop and I'm Rap, and I'm going to start on my 97 bad boy. Now, I bought this bike new. It was late 96 when I picked it up, and had about 4,000 miles on it and did a bunch of motor work to it. So I just wanted to go over the motor work real quick so you kind of know what you're looking at as I start working on it. The work I did to it was I put 10.5 Wiseco pistons in it. It's a true 10-7-to-1 motor. It has about 205 psi of cranking compression. I have an EV27 cam in it. I also have a single fire Dyna ignition. This is the Dyna 2000. It's the early one that went under the seat. Now they're all in the nose cone. I also put a thunder header on it. Now, other than that, it's stock bore. It's pretty much a stock motor, but I did set up the squish area. And when I first built this bike, and that was before all the ethanol gas, this bike would get about 45 to 50 miles to the gallon while I was cruising around because the combustion chamber is so efficient. So with that being said, you can see I already took the tanks off. I probably did that a year and a half ago. I have the carburetor off. I did rebuild the carburetor during that time when I took it off. So now I need to get the intake manifold off, the rocker boxes off, the heads off, the cylinders off, and that way I can replace the base gaskets at that point. Whenever I take any motor apart, I always have them honed and ringed, so I'll be doing that. The bike has about 28 or 29,000 miles on it, so while it's apart, I'm also going to do a full valve job, and I think at this point I'm going to upgrade the springs because it was still running the stock springs, and I think it's just time. I'll probably end up replacing the tappets at the same time because I don't want to do all this work to the motor and then have a tappet come apart. I'm still running the stock CB carb on this bike. I do have the Screaming Eagle backing plate on the carburetor, and I have the Screaming Eagle crossover tube. I haven't vented the atmosphere because I don't want that oily air being pushed back into the carburetor. When I was riding this bike, it was my only bike and I rode it pretty hard, so it wouldn't surprise me to see the valve seats have some wear on them. It also wouldn't surprise me to see that the rings are worn, or even possibly even the cylinders. So if it has too much wear, of course I'll bore it and go over a piston size. And I really like this thunder header. It's really powerful down low. The other things I'll be doing with this bike, it needs a throwout bearing, so I'll be pulling the cover off, replacing the throwout bearing. The front rim has been bent forever. I've had a front rim for probably 9 or 10 years that I bought, have it used, and also have the Buchanan stainless spokes for it. I'm going to be putting new tires on it. Also, it'll be getting a full brake system rebuild. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the intake manifold off. Then after that, I'm going to get the headers off, and then I'll be pulling the rocker boxes, heads, and cylinders. So stick around. I appreciate you watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Now that I'm back on this, the first thing I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to get the upper motor mount off because that has to come off one way or the other. That'll make it a little easier to get the intake manifold off. Okay, these bolts here are 9/16. I'm sure when I did the motor work, I put plenty of Loctite on these. That seems like it could have been tighter. Make sure to put the bolt back into the nut piece so that it doesn't get lost. This is the disconnect for the Vose switch. I'm going to disconnect that. Now it's going to come right off. Also disconnect the horn. That's the horn wire there. This here is just a wire that goes over the ground from the horn so it doesn't go anywhere. When I go back together with this bike, this is a vacuum line that goes over to the petcock. I'm going to eliminate that. They sell a block-off plate for the petcock, and you don't have to use this anymore. I'm obviously still keeping the Vose switch. All right, now loosen these Allens. That was pretty straightforward. And now the intake just comes right out. So we'll take a look at this. Looks like everything's pretty straightforward here. So these O-rings are definitely dry rotted. You can see that right there. The one on the other side seems to be in the exact same shape, which makes sense. Back in the day when I did this, I did clean up the intake. Now you don't want a polished intake, you still want a rough finish on the intake. That keeps the fuel in suspension, but I did take a lot of the casting out of it. Now I'm going to take the rocker box covers off. It's these 4 Allens, and the top cover comes off. These are 3/16 on my bike. I can see these bolts I changed to polished stainless steel. I picked this tool up a while ago. This will be the first time I'm using it. Allows me to get in on some of these real nice and easy. I guess it's a little tight because it's new. Now that it's loose, I can sneak in here with this ball and Allen wrench and screw it out real nice and easy. On the rear rocker box, you can get to this Allen screw down through the frame like that, and that'll allow you to get it off. But also that tool I bought allows you to do it without having to go down through the frame like that. One thing I want to point out is that these bolts get a gasket up against the washer. There's the gasket there, and you can see it has a real thick washer, and then the rocker box bolt. All 8 of these have this gasket, so it's important when you're going back together to make sure you get that gasket on them. Now I'm going to pull it off and you'll get to see it with me. Sneak it right out like that. Everything is surprisingly clean. The gaskets are still in pretty good shape, not that I would reuse them. Again, that's really clean. Happy with that. On this one, the gasket stayed in the middle box. You just take it out like that. If you look, these are spotless. Look like I just cleaned them yesterday. Before you pull any of this off, you want to make sure that you're on the base circle of the cam and that the push rods are loose. That way you can take this off and don't have to worry about having spring pressure on it. Because if you do, this could come off cockeyed or whatever and then damage the threads where the bolts are. I keep everything that comes off the heads in one bag, that way I don't lose any of it or run the chance of not knowing where the bolt goes. Now I'm going to pull the push rod covers off. Then you collapse those down. Now this one's loose, this one is not. So I'm going to put the bike in 5th gear and rotate the engine until they're both on the base circle of the cam, and you can rotate them with your fingers easily. Taking the spark plugs out makes it much easier to rotate the engine, of course. Now it'll be easier to rotate over. Now they both spin easily with my fingers. I can take this rocker box off. Now I loosened these in a crisscross pattern already. So now that they were all loose, I'm just taking them out. All 4 of these bolts are the same length. Now to have those 4 1/2-inch bolts out, I'm going to take the 7/16 bolts out. Now the 2 Allen bolts right there. These are 3/16. Alright, now this should come right up like that. See the gasket stayed on this side. Of course I'll be replacing all these. Everything looks good and clean. Now you can just lift the push rods out. You can see where these are the adjustable push rods. These were made by V Thunder and the part number is EVL E-7001R. Now I'm going to take the breather off. Those nuts are 3/4. You have a washer on the inside and a washer on the outside of that nut. I forgot to mention I have the S&S lifter limiters installed on the factory lifters on this bike. When you take the lower O-ring out of the lifter block, there's a washer on the bottom, then the O-ring. Next you have to take out the 12-point head bolts, and they're 1/2-inch. And when you take these out, I take them out a little at a time on each one so as not to damage the head. And I'll go in a crossing pattern to get those off. Alright, now they're all nice and loose. They come off real easy. Of course, the long ones go in the center here, and on the outside is the short ones. So if you were watching that video and said, hey, big dummy, you got to pull the exhaust before you can pull the head, you'd be right. Each time I work on this, I make sure to put plenty of never sees on all this. That way I don't have to worry about breaking head studs when I'm removing it. Alright, there we go with the head. Looks like it was running a little rich. I can see I used factory Harley head gaskets. I won't be going back on with those. The other thing I want to point out that I kind of forgot about, was I really did a lot of chamber smoothing with a Dremel and a sander drum. Now, I was always told that you never take material out of this area leading right to the valve on the bottom side, because that hump is what helps it make the corner. But I could see where I took quite a bit around this area and kind of smoothed it and smoothed the bowl. The other thing I did with these, especially on the intake, was I smoothed the intake seat into the bowl. And I'll show you that once I get the valves out of it. I also feel like the pistons look good. I don't see any grooves in them or anything like that. But the only way to truly tell is to clean them up and then check them. The rings are still really good shape. You can see the gap's nice and wide on those. They still have plenty of spring tension on that second ring. And the first ring seems to be the exact same way. Still plenty of spring tension on those. So that's real good. Of course, I'll be replacing those. No up and down play in the rod whatsoever. I didn't expect there to be. Now I'll get the rear taken apart and show you what that looks like. Now that I have both the heads off and both the cylinders, I'm looking at the pistons. They seem carboned up on the top. Other than that, they look to be in pretty good shape. And I'm going to take those off to clean them. So the way I take these off is, first thing I do is stuff a rag down in here. You don't want one of these circlips flying down into there. Then I put a screwdriver in here, and that pretty much contains it. I come in here and I just pop it just like that. And you can see the screwdriver stops it from falling into the engine unless it hits just that right spot. Be the same over here. Now that I have both of them out, I'm just going to push the pin out. The way I get these pins out, I like to put an extension through them and hook a socket and a long socket on. And that way I can support this and not damage the piston while I'm taking it out. And there it comes out nice and easy. Other than the carbon, this piston looks to be in really good shape. I'm going to mark an F in it for front. Now that I have an F marked in it, it's easy to tell the bigger valve pocket is the intake and the smaller is the exhaust. Right here on the piston, I can see that it's stamped in EXH. Now I'll do the same thing on the rear. Alright, there's everything apart. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and stick around for the rest of this series.